What's up guys, I made it to the shop here with the MK6 Golf R up on the lift as you can see. Today we are changing springs, taking the race springs off of the car and putting the OEM springs on to give myself a little bit extra road clearance, better ride, etc. This is probably going to be a pretty unpopular video because this thing has such good stance. Obviously not right now, but you know what I mean. So the first thing I want to go over are specialty tools that you absolutely need to have to do this job. So the first specialty tool you'll need to have is this offset box wrench. This is a 13/16. You really need to have the 21mm, but I couldn't find a metric version of this, and 13/16 is about 20.6mm, so it will do the job. Similarly, this is a 13/16 inch spark plug deep socket wrench, and basically the reason you need these is because you need to take off a 21mm nut while holding an Allen through the middle, so you'll have to have an opening in the middle. This is a 3/8 to 1/4 inch step down, and this is a makeshift tool. VW has a spindle spreader, which is essentially an oval shaped tool that when you stick it into the spindle, you turn it 90 degrees, it will open up a pinch sleeve, and don't have that. So I've heard that works. I've also heard that you can use chisels, anything really to jam in there to open that up. You'll also need Torx bits, you'll need an M14, and then you'll also need an M6, I believe. The last tool you absolutely do need to have is these spring compression tools. You cannot take the strut assembly apart while the springs are compressed. You will die. Don't do it. You'll probably also want some penetrating spray to try to coax the strut out of the spindle. Okay, so we're gonna get the wheel off. Just need a 17mm deep socket. And now we can take a look back here and kind of go over what we're about to do. Here's your end link connecting to the sway bar down here, and the end link connects to the strut up here with this nut. And this is the back of that bolt. As you can see, you can't really put a wrench on it. So if that stud here starts to spin, there is a 6mm Torx bit at the end of this. I'll try to zoom in so you can see it. That's a 6mm Torx bit that you can stick into the end of that while putting an open end or a box end wrench on the nut. Put the 6mm in there just so it'll jam itself back there. You can pull this end link out, move it over out of the way. It's always a good idea to keep your nuts and bolts together, so I'm gonna thread this guy back on here. Now that we have that side off, we've got to go do the other side, which I'll do real quick. Okay, we're on the other side. Got the end link removed. Had to use the same method using the 6mm triple square at the end of the bolt while spinning the nut off with the 18mm. So now that we have the end link taken apart, we're going to want to take these ABS wires and unplug them from their wiring harnesses. So you take this and you pull that ABS wire and get that out of the way. The next step in this process is going down underneath to remove these 3 nuts under the control arm. These are a 16mm nut, I believe, so let's get those off. So first I'm going to take a breaker bar and crack these guys loose. Or shear it off. Holy shit. So as you just saw, I just sheared off all 3 of the studs under that passenger side control arm. I did it on the driver's side, and this is what it's supposed to look like. Quick update. We started this project at about 1 o'clock. It's 3:30-ish. I'm trying to get a hold of someone to take me to the parts store so I can get a new ball joint with new studs. But right now I'm going to have to completely remove the lower control arm so I can get that old ball joint out. So yeah, not going to plan. It is currently 5:50 p.m. I've taken the lower control arm out and we finally got the ball joint out that we sheared the studs on. We had to cut it out, and here's the 3 studs that we sheared off. Now we have to put the new ball joint in that I just picked up at Advanced Auto Parts, and hopefully we can finish this job. So we got another update. It is 7:30 right now, and this place is an absolute mess. Although we did get out one of the struts. So here it is. I'm gonna go through and show you how to change the springs on this guy, and then I will go to the other side and kind of detail the process of getting the strut out. Okay, so we've got this first strut out, finally. The first thing you want to do is compress this spring. So you see the springs seated up against this top hat and around the cup at the bottom. This is in compression, so if you were to take out this nut, this thing would fly off of here. There's a lot of potential energy in a compressed spring, definitely enough to kill you. So please exercise caution when you're doing this, and make sure that you have a gap up here before you start messing with the nut. We've got our spring compressors, got that locked in here. So we got this one locked in on this side. We will do the same over here. Try to keep these opposite to each other so that you are compressing evenly around here. I've got my impact driver right here that I'm going to use to evenly compress this spring. This is definitely out of tension. So the next thing we have to do is we have to hold the center stud while we back off this nut. So we've got our 13/16 inch offset right here, and we've got our hex head socket set here. What size is this? I don't know if we have the right bit for that. Okay, this is a T30 bit. It's a Torx bit, but I think it will do the job of holding this in place. Another good indicator that you're compressed enough is if this nut is coming out and has no tension on it, obviously your springs are compressed enough. So with that out, pop this guy off. And you will notice on this top hat, there is arrows here. So there's 3 ways you can put this on your car. This arrow should be pointing front and back on the car. So there you go. And there is your New Speed spring. New Speed OEM Golf R. Put the flat side down, hits this stop here. You gotta get the end of the spring to that stop. So now we have to repeat the compression process. So now that we've got this back together, make sure the spring is all the way up against stop down here on the bottom cup. And we're gonna hold this again here and tighten it up. So we've got this nut on sufficiently where I feel comfortable that there's enough thread there that we can back off these compressors. So we're over here on the driver's side, and you know, I really messed up the ball joint and I had to replace it on the passenger side. And in the process of doing so, I had to remove this control arm, and I realized it's a pretty easy process. Instead of having to really pull this thing down to get yourself some extra clearance, since it's so easy, I'm just going to pull this one off as well. It's as simple as pulling this bolt, that bolt, and this bolt out, and your control arm will just come right down. This first bolt is an 18 millimeter. There's that one. I believe this one over here is also an 18 millimeter. The last two are 16. Okay, so now we're on the driver's side. Let's go through the process of disassembling everything. So remember, like long time ago, like 6 hours ago, when we disconnected this end link? Yeah, that's still disconnected. The next thing you wanted to do was disconnect these guys, the nuts on the 3 ball joint studs. Obviously, I just removed the control arm. That's not necessary, but I think it's gonna make my life a lot easier. The next step is removing the M14 triple square right here. This guy. And on the other side is an 18 millimeter nut. So you're gonna hold the one side with the M14 triple square while you remove the 18 millimeter nut on the other side. That should come off, and then this comes out. This is actually the pinch bolt. So this comes back here, and when you tighten it up, it pinches this sleeve around the strut. In the back, there's an opening of this pinch right between where the bolt fastens together. What we want to do is we want to wedge something in there so this opens up and allows us to pull this strut out of the hub. So what we're gonna do is, first and foremost, we're gonna hit this thing with PB Blaster. We're gonna wedge a chisel back here to open this up, and then we are going to loosen up these guys up here, fasten the top hat on. This will just give us a little bit of wiggle room, and we're going to just wiggle this thing around until this assembly drops down from that, and then we'll remove those bolts and pull the strut out of the vehicle. Here's the spring right here, and then if you look right here, that's the little channel that you need to open up for the pinch bolt. So now that we have a little bit of a gap between that sleeve and the strut, we are going to penetrate this with PB Blaster. So we just sprayed PB Blaster between the spindle and this pinch sleeve. And what we're trying to do is pull this whole assembly down and get the spindle to come up out of the pinch sleeve. So we'll let that sit for a while, and then we'll try to see if we can maneuver that out. Okay, so we've let the PB Blaster sit for a while. Got the control arm linkage out of the way. We're looking pretty clear. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to use this mallet. I'm gonna tap on the sides of the sleeve and try to get this to start moving. You can see we've made it probably about 1/2 inch. We've got about 1.5 inches to go. Hit it with a little bit more PB Blaster. So at this point, the axle isn't even touching the sway bar, so we definitely have some more room to go. The fin in the back of the strut is almost clearing the top face of this sleeve, and once it does, you can use a crowbar to pry the rest of it out. So back here, you've got this thing right here, and this is the fin I've been talking about. It's connected to the strut here. This fin, once you get some clearance between this and the fin, you can actually get a crowbar in between here and start prying it up that way. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the 13 millimeter bolts up here completely off to give myself a little bit more wiggle room down underneath. Here you go. It is currently midnight Sunday, and I have gotten almost one spring done. So I'm gonna go around the car and show you what I have accomplished in the last 12 hours. So as you may remember, broke the ball joint on this guy. Well, I did manage to get a new one and install it correctly. I reinstalled the lower control arm, reinstalled the shock with the new spring in it. All I have to do is torque those all down to spec. So on this side, you guys saw that I did get the shock out. There's nothing in here. So that shock currently right over here, still with the new speed spring on it. So tomorrow morning I'll be swapping out that spring for that spring. Even without the complications that I had with the ball joint and shearing those studs off, this job is probably, if it's your first time, probably an 8 to 10 hour job. Definitely was more involved than I was expecting, and yeah, I've been here a long time, haven't eaten. This is my only form of transportation, so I'm getting picked up right now, and I'll see you in the morning. So it's Sunday morning. We need to get the spring switched over on that strut over there, and we need to put it back into the fronts, and then we'll do the rears. So let's get to it.